Hello Thrive Nation, hope you Thrivers are doing well. I've got a very special guest on the show today. We have been talking about breathing and breath work because 2020 was the year of the breath for me, where I learned to breathe through my nose, and it was quite a revelation when we did Patrick McEwen on the show, one of the early podcast episodes that we'll link to. And we've got a South African hero, a medical doctor who specialized in breathing. She's got an incredible book that I read about, I think 3-4 years ago, called Breathe. And so Dr. Ela, is it Manga or Manga?
Manga.
Manga is with us on the Made to Thrive show. She's going to give us a little bit of a backstory and how she's changing the landscape in Africa and I think beyond. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Good. Give us a little bit of a backstory, your training, what you did, how you got into Breathwork. Now Breathwork Africa, it's incredible. I've heard so many incredible stories and it was hard to pin you down from patients and clients in the industry because you're a real pioneer who's been very contrarian in many ways. But give us a little bit about your history and what you're doing at this stage.
Yeah, interesting journey and how breath actually found me.
Oh wow.
And in kind of whispers and in interesting ways, but only really obviously about 10 years ago. So I studied as a medical doctor, graduated from WITS in 1998.
Oh cool.
Went through the route of, my internship and community service. And I initially had ideas to specialize.
Okay.
But after my 2-year stint at what was then Joburg General Hospital, I was burnt out, sleep deprived,
Sure.
disconnected from my own humanity.
Okay.
And I realized that there was no way I could continue in that system. I didn't have the resources within myself, and I knew that I wouldn't benefit patients.
Mm.
And so I took the opportunity of practicing as a locum for a friend for a year, and fell in love with GP practice.
Oh wow, okay.
Because I loved connecting with patients on a deeper level.
Okay.
Spending more time with them, listening to their stories, understanding the bigger context of their lives. And being a GP affords you that opportunity.
Yeah.
And I was working in an area called Windsor East, which was a thriving, bustling young community at that point. And I really loved my time as a GP. But I realized that in getting to know my patients more, I felt frustrated that the way that I was trained wasn't supporting sustainable wellness, that I was really treating symptoms. And yet, understanding the patterns of illness that was starting to emerge through my relationship with them.
Wow.
And so I realized that I was spending more and more time counseling my patients, but didn't feel I was equipped enough through my training at medical school to support sustainable wellness in a way that I felt comfortable with. I needed to know more. And so I went through my own dark night of the soul,
Absolutely.
kind of a crisis of meaning, if you will, and realized that I needed to study more, I needed to understand more. But 15, 17 years ago, the concept of integrative medicine was very new. In fact, it wasn't even known. And so I investigated all these modalities that I could study: Ayurvedic medicine, Chinese medicine, and eventually came across a modality called body talk.
Yes.
And I thought, well, this sounds interesting. Had a personal experience, and I thought, wow, okay, let me go and study this. Let me go and do a course. And it really blew me away, because here was a modality that brought together the concepts of quantum physics, of Vedic wisdom, Chinese medicine, anatomy, physiology, everything that I loved, into one system in a very kind of intangible way. So I started to bring some of those techniques into my practice and realized soon enough I couldn't do GP practice anymore. And decided to sell up my practice and move to a wellness center in Muldersdrift. And my best friend at the time, well, she's still my best friend, Marisa, and I started creating these programs that brought together massage therapy, counseling. So she's a social worker by training, body talk. I started playing around with functional medicine and So we started to craft these 6-week, 12-week programs for people that they could experience a holistic way of being and healing. And we just developed our own kind of methodology. In that time, I came across a breathwork teacher, Master Dan Brule, and my first session with him completely changed my life.
Sure.
I can't explain it more than a mystical experience. You know, connecting with an essence of my being that I kind of knew was there, but had been searching in other ways to connect with it, and just had such a powerful experience. And I thought, wow, you know, if people could connect with this, the essence of who they are, in such a short space of time, there's something here. And what has always frustrated me about the model of integrative medicine or functional medicine is sometimes we can apply the same paradigm of Western medicine, but instead just using supplements. You know, and it's not always accessible to people. And in the context that we're living in South Africa, where so many people don't have access to even basic healthcare, how do we bring this concept of integrative medicine, holistic medicine, to people who really need it? We all need it.
Absolutely.
And here is something that is always within us, something that's always here. It's our birthright. And if we learn to use it more skillfully, you know, we have some chance of creating the environment in which healing can happen.
Sure. You sound very passionate, and that's incredible. I do want to ask you a very important question. Was it nature or nurture that took you along a path where you decided actually Western medicine and not looking at the root of disease, saying, hang on, I'm not actually, you know, involved with the patient's sustainable wellness, as you said. What were the keys that, and I'm quite emotional about it because there's not a lot of people that make the shift. They've studied so many years at medical school. They've laid their lives down. They're willing to just treat symptoms and not get to the root and not use things like breathwork that are available to everyone and so powerful. What was it? Was it nature or nurture?
I think it's a combination of both and something beyond even that. You know, I was blessed to grow up in a family that had, well, I had a grandfather that was just the most incredible human being. So my dad died when I was very young, and grew up in an extended family home, and so spent a lot of time with my grandfather, who was a historian and a deeply conscious, spiritual, beautiful man, and spent so much time with him in the garden, in nature, listening to stories of how he grew up. And I believe that there was something in my relationship with him that sparked something within me. And when he got ill, I was about 14 years old, and I remember spending the last days of his life with him.
Sure.
And he was in such an expanded state of consciousness then. There was absolutely no fear of dying. He knew he was dying. And there was something about that experience that changed my relationship with death, and therefore my relationship with life.
Wow.
And it just, you know, it was only later in my life that I realized that those seeds were planted so early. You know, so I went through the conventional system like everybody else.
Yes.
Had no, you know, big vision when I was at medical school that this was what I wanted, this was what I was working towards. But kind of life directed me on the path that I feel was already destined, and I just said yes.
But you had those seeds. Dr.
Those seeds
Ela,
were there.
and it was out of community that those seeds were planted.
Right, absolutely.
And it was maybe through suffering and going through burnout and pain, moving from pain to purpose, that brought you along this journey where you were curious about other forms of healing modalities. And possibly your grandfather had this ancient wisdom
Absolutely.
that he imparted to you, that you filed in your subconscious somewhere.
Absolutely.
And you needed at the right time. So it was probably a little bit of nurture more than nature.
Yeah, you know, when we talk about nature, we talk about how we inherit genes and
Yes.
the memories. that are held in our genetic code.
Yes.
You know, so we talk a lot about trauma, intergenerational trauma, but we also inherit resilience.
Yeah.
We also inherit the wisdom of those who have come before us.
Absolutely.
And all that information is there in the coding, you know, and so it's the nurture that will determine what genes are expressed,
Yes.
how the genes are expressed.
Yeah, the epigenetic factors.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's incredible. So you went along your journey, you started, you know, doing breath work, started doing workshops, and you grew from there. Take us a little bit further down the road in terms of you're now partnering with different practitioners. We spoke about Dr. Ela Manga that we're going to have on the show. You know, if I had to just ask you this question, which I've asked many of my guests, who is Dr. Ela Manga?
I think Dr. Ela Manga is...
Sorry, I got it right.
No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever, it doesn't matter. Is in the making.
Okay.
She's discovering deeper aspects of who she is, and so she's in the making.
Okay. Good. That's a fascinating answer in terms of growth and development and where you're at and what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so then take us along the process of breathwork and where you're at now, and then we can ask some sort of specific sort of conditions. Where you work in Breathwork Africa, you're making it available to so many more people because you're an educator, and I always tell the community that the Latin of doctor is docere, which is actually teacher.
Yes.
So you're teaching a lot of people. So tell us about Breathwork Africa.
Yeah. It really grew organically. Like I said, you know, I didn't have this grand vision of having a breathwork school, training
Yes.
other practitioners. That was not in my life's plan. But after I experienced breathwork in my own life, I started to just do once a month workshops on a Saturday afternoon,
Yes.
you know, for 2 hours. And sometimes 3 people would come, sometimes 4 people would come.
Okay.
But slowly over the years, more and more people came.
Okay.
And so my teacher, Dan, started to run a course, and he just had notes that were quite maybe disorganized in a way.
Putting it nicely.
And so I basically held the group that he was training in South Africa because he travels all over the world.
Okay.
And I started to organize his material
Yeah.
and build on it. I started to build on it and add in what I understood about anatomy and physiology, and you know, crafted a course, a 3-day course, a foundation course.
Yes.
And we've done maybe 20 of those over the
Wow.
years, and they're really quite phenomenal.
Wow.
And people wanted more.
Okay.
And I thought, oh flip, now what? So we expanded on that, and we started to offer a 1-year breathwork certification.
Sure.
And I feel strongly about this because there's only so much I can do as a human being. And I think as part of our growth, we realize that we are part of each other and we need to connect in order to have impact in the world. We need to connect with each other. We need to support each other's skills.
That's right.
And so I find this has been happening more and more. And it's been quite incredible in offering the course. I'm learning so much. I'm being enriched by all these incredible people who are coming with their own skills and their own take on things. And it's just refining the course.
Yes.
Every time we teach it, it's being refined. And so my dream is that breathwork becomes a certification, like a university degree, because it is so rich, it is so deep. And we're discovering more and more and more. I mean, just in the last year, the landscape of breathwork has changed dramatically.
Yes.
And I believe that it is such an underrated aspect of health. And COVID has certainly brought this to the fore. You know, what if this became part of our training at medical school? What if doctors were trained to become aware of breathing patterns, to teach it?
Yes.
I think that many of the chronic illnesses that we're seeing today can be reversed. And we could start off from a different base. If we taught children how to use their breath skillfully, we could prevent so many of the health problems we're seeing today. you know.
Absolutely. And over the last 12 months in my other life as a physician, 22 years here, I've never seen more anxious, stressed out people in the last 12 months. And why are so many people so stressed out and have so much anxiety and fear over the last 12 months?
Well, I think we came into the pandemic from a low base. Okay. I started to think about and talk about and write about burnout maybe 7 years ago, because I saw this as an epidemic. And that so many of the people that I was seeing in my practice was somewhere along that spectrum. Yeah. Maybe not in full burnout, but certainly on their way there. So I think we entered it on a low base, and the pandemic has really brought to the fore the underlying issues that we've been sitting with as humanity for a very long time. It's brought it to our awareness. So it's simply bringing to our awareness what has been there for us to look at, to see, to work with, to become aware of. So it's not a new problem. I think it's very much related to our core fear, our fear of our own mortality.
That's true, and you had a sort of a absolutely, not existential crisis, but a time where you engaged and confronted the fear of death with your grandfather.
And I'll continue to do so.
Yeah, that's powerful.
It's my personal work. Last year, my mom passed, and it was a beautiful experience. I was there holding space for her when she took her last breath.
Sure.
And it was such a sacred moment. And it was such a beautiful moment, a healing moment, because I realized that she was simply releasing her body and that she's even more available.
Sure.
It was so tangible for me that this wasn't the end, that it was a transition.
Yeah, powerful.
And I believe there's something about what we've been experiencing, what we're experiencing now, faced with the death of people we love. Everyone we know has lost someone, or knows someone who's lost someone.
That's right.
And this is an opportunity for us to really confront our deepest fear and to confront the question of who are we?
Yeah, that's powerful, isn't it? Yeah, and I think it's people are engaging and asking these questions in terms of meaning. What's amazing about your story is there's community is one of the Made to Thrive pillars, and you had your grandfather, and now you spoke about your mentor that's helped you along the journey. There's been incredible people along your journey that help fashion you and form you, which is fantastic. But having spoken to a lot of the doctors, we know the importance of vitamin D, we know the importance of supplements, we know the importance in terms of biology and looking at zinc and looking at the things like selenium. A lot has been spoken about the ivermectins and how we treat this with hydroxychloroquine from a natural perspective or a drug perspective. I don't think there's been a loud voice or a trumpet with regards to breathwork and how we should be breathing, how we're dealing with stress. Tell us about the landscape within the medical fraternity, why breathwork and these other complementary techniques are not really getting the airspace that they should, because there's a lot of science behind breathing now. It's not only an ancient wisdom, it's modern science that has come through. What is the problem with the medical sort of fraternity and all these complementary things like yoga and body talk and breath work and things that have huge impacts on people's wellness, but they're just not really valued amongst the medical world?
Yeah. Breathwork has always been part of the spiritual modalities, part of meditation, and of course people have used breathwork to reach expanded states of consciousness. So I think for a very long time breathwork has been seen in that kind of sphere and category. And with COVID, breathing techniques have come in as a way for people to almost in a reactive way and not in a preventative way still. So we're still not making the link that investing in our relationship with our breath even before we become anxious, or even before we get COVID, that this is the ultimate health prevention that can build resilience, can build and support our immune system. You know, I think this is where the missing link is, because people are starting to see the value of breath work, but only in a reactive way, in a therapeutic way, and not enough in a proactive way, if that makes sense. And so it's going to shift. I believe it's going to shift, because people are already experiencing the benefits of breathing through maybe default.
But is that not the privileged few only? And I asked this question because my expectation was, once the president had done his address many times, the health minister would come on and say, there are things that are not costly, you know, that you can go out and get sunshine and do some breathing, and maybe get a specialist on there to talk about, you know, real food, and just to really speak about the other side of trying to help people. Because as you said, yes, it's supplementation and those things are important, and I understand that, but the political sort of medical space of not empowering people from a national point of view in this huge pandemic, was it too much of an expectation for me, for the health minister or a specialist to come out and talk about these things, about fresh air and real food and movement and breath work?
I think there are two aspects of that, and the first thing that comes to mind is that we don't value the things that are free. Okay, it's too simple.
Yeah.
So as human beings, when we are faced with complex issues, we look for complex answers.
It's true.
You know, and it wasn't Einstein that said.
Yeah.
So I think that we disregard what is so simple and what is so available. So that's one aspect of it. I think the second aspect of it is that when we are faced with this huge pandemic and this overwhelming issue and what the rest of the world is doing, then we kind of fall into that same pattern of thinking, and it's fear-based. And that way of thinking is, what can we do to anti this? Okay, so it's the antibiotic, it's the anti-inflammatory, it's everything that works against. And this is what the pandemic is showing us. Now, for me, the virus is an intelligent
being,
consciousness that is a mirror. You know, it is a mirror to humanity to say, this is how you show up. Look how you show up. So you disconnect, you silo more, you work against nature. And I think that the greatest lesson for me in my journey is realizing with great humility that we are nature. We are part of nature, and therefore we are subject to nature's laws. And if we are to have a health conversation, truly a sustainable health conversation, then the question is, how do we start to live in accordance with the laws of nature in a way that is relevant for the world that we are moving into? The fourth industrial revolution, a world driven by AI. What does it mean to live in rhythm, in harmony, in alignment with who we really are as natural beings? Because what we're doing now is not it.
Absolutely agree. And now, before we move into the practical of breath work, you know, looking at Andrew Wheel's work, the 478, the box breathing, I want to do some practical with you. I want to actually work through it for our YouTube viewers, and then also for the podcast if you're going to be listening to this. But talk about what is adrenal burnout or adrenal stress or adrenal fatigue. We get a lot of questions from the community with regards to those three concepts. A little bit about the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system, just to set up a little bit of a base before we actually look at the technique of breathwork.
To answer that question goes back to what we've just said, is that we are natural beings subject to the laws of nature. And if we look at the way nature works, it works in rhythm. It works in cycles. The cycle of energy and relaxation, of day and night. You know, we see it reflected in every cycle of nature. And this cycle of energy and relaxation is reflected in every breath that we take. The inhale is the sympathetic nervous system at play, the parasympathetic nervous system when we exhale. So these rhythms are at play in every breath with every heartbeat. Okay, and it is responsive to what we perceive from our environment. So when we are perceiving from within the body and around our body that this situation requires energy, the body mounts that energy. We get to use and channel and release that energy to deal with that situation. And once that energy is channeled, released, expressed, we relax back down to the parasympathetic state, which regenerates the body's resources. And we know all those powerful benefits of being in that state, so that when the next surge is required, we have those resources. Okay, so this is how we are designed. What's happened is, for so many reasons, we are overfiring that sympathetic nervous system. So we are receiving so many signals from our world around us, from news, from social media, from the way that we're living, from the way we're sitting at our desks, wearing our masks, being exposed to what's happening in the rest of the world, what's happening in the Gaza, what's happening in India. It's overwhelming to the system. At the same time, we're also receiving stress signals from these interoceptors in our body. And we're also receiving signals from the way we're breathing. So, our poor brains are just, firing. That amygdala, that panic button is just overfiring. Adrenaline and cortisol is being released and flooded into the system. This changes the way we breathe. Our whole physiology gets primed to deal with the situation. And so what happens is that we might drop down into the parasympathetic state a little bit, but not enough for the body to restore its resources. Okay. And as human beings, we have this incredible ability to adapt. And this is what we've done. We've adapted, but we've maladapted. And so as a result, our baseline has shifted upwards. Okay. And so we've become maladapted to more adrenalized energy, thinking that we are fine.
Yeah.
But really, over time, we are depleting our resources. And so, in the energy zone map that you'll see in the book, I've created a map which will illustrate some of the symptoms that you can expect when you are in the danger zone. And it's a lot of the symptoms that we see in our practices. The IBS, the insomnia, the low-grade anxiety, until the point where the body cannot cope anymore. Okay? And this is the tipping point, where the adrenal glands simply do not have the resources to mount that energy response. And this is when we actually burn out. And this is adrenal fatigue. It's when the adrenal glands are actually depleted.
Okay. Great. Now, someone's listening and says, I've been really anxious, I've been really stressed, I want to start practically using breathwork. How can they start? And before maybe you answer that, what is the science saying? Because I know we have a lot of practitioners listening to the podcast. What is the science saying about breathwork?
So breath is a language. Okay, so it's part of the body's autonomic nervous system. Okay, we don't have to think about it. And therefore, every thought that we think, every emotion that we feel, every posture that we hold has a corresponding breathing pattern. Now, if we are locked in that adrenalized energy mode, what's happening to our breathing pattern? So our breathing pattern is reflecting that. As a result, we start to breathe more high up in the chest, we start to breathe through our mouths, and we develop dysfunctional breathing habits over time. Right? Eventually, we become locked in that state and not realizing that this is having an impact on our physiology, it's having an impact on our cellular metabolism, it's having an impact on our resilience, our ability to self-regulate. Okay, so it's having a whole ripple effect. And so when we start to do breath work and start to become aware of these patterns, we start to use practices that help us to come back to a breathing pattern that is adaptable, that is flexible. Breath intelligence. We investing in our breath intelligence again.
Wow. Fantastic. Now, one question before we go into the practical side is, we know how important nutrient-dense food is, real food is, and we know how important movement is and exercise, and there's a lot of ancient wisdom there as well as science there. If you had to put sort of a comparison, how important, Dr. Ela, is breathwork with regards to food and exercise?
it's really at the center of of our existence.
Sure.
You know, so we can be eating the healthiest meal, but if we are having that meal in a state of anxiety and stress, the body cannot release the digestive enzymes to break that food down, to absorb the nutrients. We're not getting the best from that meal. Okay?
Yeah.
We also know that the kind of food that we eat will have an impact on the way we're breathing.
So they work together. The one affects the other, and the other affects the other.
When we're in a state of adrenalized energy, we know that all the blood resources are shunted away from the digestive system towards the periphery, towards our muscles, you know. So it's going to, in the long term, affect our digestive health. So if we look at the breath itself, we'll see that it is connected to every aspect of our physiology. It is related to pH balance. It is related to our hormonal cycles. It is related to our digestive system, to our neurological system. There are direct connections between our breath and every other aspect of our lives. There's a direct connection between our breath and our psychology.
Sure.
Our breath and the way that the subtle energy flows through our meridians, which run, as you know, in the fascial lines, through the fascial planes. You know, so it is at the center, at the core of everything that we do. Can we really exercise efficiently if we're not using our breath efficiently? We know from Patrick McEwen's work how it can dramatically change our exercise performance when we change the way we breathe.
Sure, that's fantastic. So it's actually at the crux of everything. It's crucially important. We need to teach our children. You know, I have my little 5-year-old and I'm teaching her because there's times where she gets a bit stressed out and overwhelmed and she starts breathing like with the upper chest and through her mouth, and I'm trying to teach her now, you know, use her diaphragm. Now she's told her teacher, and she's because her teacher says take a big deep breath, and they breathe with the shoulders and they breathe with the mouth, you know, and so we do need to teach the next generation. So if someone's listening now, obviously the sympathetic nervous system is the fight, the flight, or the freeze system. It's your stress system. It's very important. It's as important as the parasympathetic, because we said we need both systems.
Need both.
And we need to have the reserves to act when we need to act accordingly. If someone's trying to get your cell phone, well, you better have sympathetic nervous system to fight off or run. And then the parasympathetic is the rest, the digest system and the repair system. So if we look at these two systems, and we find that a lot of people, knowing in South Africa that I think South Africa, according to Bloomberg and the stress code, I was chatting to Richard Sutton, is I think second or third most stressed country in the world. So we've got a huge sympathetic drive, overdrive. Someone's listening now, and breathing is the foundation of almost everything. Where do they start? What do they do?
We start with awareness.
Okay.
So there are millions of techniques out there.
Yes.
Okay? And each one of them has a beautiful role to play. But none of those will be effective if we're not aware of how we're breathing in the first place. So notice. So when someone comes into my practice, Dr. Matara, the cardiologist, will send his patients because he knows that they're all in sympathetic overdrive, you know. And so I watch, and I get people to really observe how they are breathing when they're lying on the mattress and their legs are crossed, and they uncross them, and they feel the relaxation in the hips and how that connects to the diaphragm and how much more freely they can breathe. So awareness is the first one. How are you breathing? How fast are you breathing? How slowly are you breathing? Are you breathing using your neck and your shoulder muscles? When you breathe in, are you sucking your tummy in? I see this so many times in Pilates practitioners or dancers, you know. I just say, take a breath, and they pull their tummy in. Amazing. That's paradoxical breathing. All right.
Okay.
So the first thing we do is observe. Let's observe how you're breathing. And let's come back to the basics of retraining the diaphragm. I am completely fascinated with the diaphragm. Okay, it's the most magnificent structure in the entire human body, I think. And so I get people, I show them pictures of the diaphragm, okay? And often we think when we breathe in, the belly has to push out. But actually, it's the rib cage that must move from side to side as the diaphragm flattens when we breathe in, right? And the lungs expand, the diaphragm flattens. Can we feel that with the rib cage opening from side to side? So often I get people just to lie on their back and I put a heavy book on their belly and say, okay, now just push that book up with your belly. As you inhale, feel your side ribs opening from side to side at the same time. Can you breathe into your back? Because we know that the richest blood supply is in the bases of our lungs. Are we getting breath there? Most of us aren't. So retraining the diaphragm is very important. I get people just to do some spinal rocks to come into their body. So most of us, because we are in that adrenalized mode, we're just living in the head, disconnected from our body. So a lot of the work is just bring your awareness back into your body. Use your breath to become more familiar with the sensations in your body. Your body is constantly sending feedback to your brain. So what are those messages that your body is sending to your brain? And we can shift that immediately. We can train relaxation into the system again, because the system has forgotten how to relax. We don't know how to relax anymore. You tell someone relax, well, what does that mean?
Yeah, go to the beach and go on the holiday.
Or I'll sit and watch Netflix.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly. Tune to the TV.
Yeah. So what does relaxation actually mean? And when people experience powerful breath and how deeply relaxed the breath can take them into a state of deep relaxation, they're completely amazed, because many people have never experienced this before.
Fantastic. So awareness, then teach them about the diaphragm, and then do you have specific starter exercises, or what is your process?
So in parallel to working with the diaphragm, I'll also work with nasal breathing. So how are we breathing at rest? So I talk about the parameters of breath intelligence. So using the diaphragm is one of them. Okay, nasal breathing at rest most of the day is another reason. Okay, so I see so many people breathing through their mouths.
Yeah.
And so let's just reverse that.
That's a good start.
Absolutely. Once people start to engage the diaphragm and breathe through their noses, just already, you're shifting something profound. They sleep better. Okay, we're breaking that cycle of adrenalized energy. And then we start to use certain techniques to stabilize the breath mechanism, to re-establish balance in the autonomic nervous system. What techniques I use is so determined, it's so different based on the person who's in front of me. So there's someone who I will spend a lot of time just using breath awareness or coherent breathing, which we know is a powerful technique to build what we call heart rate variability, which is the measurable for resilience. It's the measure for the adaptability of our autonomic nervous system. How quickly can we return to a state of balance after a state of stress, or are we locked at that high baseline? Okay, so coherent breathing is one of the safest, most powerful, most researched breathing techniques available. Just breathing slowly in for a count of 5 or 6, breathing slowly out for a count of 5 or 6 with no gaps or pauses between the breaths.
Okay, great. So there's that coherent breathing. You spoke about heart rate variability, and we distribute Elite HRV, which measures heart rate variability, and almost the difference, with a bit of simplification, the difference between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. And the more varied your heart rate is, the healthier you are. I've seen a big difference using breathwork. This Elite HRV gives you live feedback, so when you do your breathwork, you can actually see what happens to HRV. You can do a morning readiness test, and there are a lot of devices, the Aura Ring that I've used, that can help you with just monitoring HRV while you sleep, which is really important. What happens to my HRV when I'm down at the coast? Even when I'm working, it improves. The difference in altitude and oxygen levels and pressures that we're under. So tell us a little bit about the future of HRV, because I think it's an important assessment of possibly your level of stress. I mean, it's not a silver bullet by any means, but it gives us some type of assessment. And I think it should be available more and more to a lot more people to see where they're at, because a lot of people don't realize the state they're in. And they often have to see these things like breathwork or meditation or mindfulness have an impact on data.
Absolutely, and that's important, and that's why I love these devices, because here's a measurable, here is a device that can give you immediate feedback, and it's really empowering. So I believe, I mean, still not many people or enough people know about heart rate variability. And this is something that needs to be common language, you know. So I see this kind of measurable and these devices being an integral part of our healthcare in our homes.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think there is a space to do the measurements, and I don't think it's got to be everything where you can't do breath work without it, but it does help guide people. You know, eventually you start realizing what the resonance sort of coherent breath is, and it helps you.
Exactly. I think the risk always with devices is that we can hand our health over, or the awareness of what's going on in our bodies, to a device. So we're depending on the device to tell us what's going on. There's a role for that, and I think that this can help us to become more in tune with what's, you know, the subtleties and the nuances of what we're experiencing in the body. So I think we just need to be careful as we go into a world of AI where we are going to be dependent on biofeedback devices, technological devices that are telling us what's going on within us. And I don't know, my hesitation with that, or my concern with that, is will we lose the ability to tune into what we are feeling for ourselves?
That's right.
You know,
self-awareness, which is so important.
Yeah, because you know, there's a powerful connect between what we are feeling in our body and how the brain is interpreting that. And so this is the point of breathwork, is that we want to become more skilled in reading the nuances of what the body is communicating to us. And so I think that we need to be using these devices to support that, rather than moving away from that.
And I suppose it depends on personality. Some people like the feedback, they like the training, they want to see if it's working or not.
Sure.
But you can understand, you know.
Absolutely.
Certain breath work techniques might work for certain people and others not. So a little bit of feedback, especially in the beginning, helps.
Absolutely.
So let us know about your other modalities. We've looked at infrared sauna and the sauna space, which is a radiation-free device that we use here. I'm in the sauna 6 days a week because it just engages my parasympathetic nervous system, really help my deep sleep markers. Things like grounding has been shown to really help the parasympathetic nervous system because of the electrons coming through. Obviously nature, sunlight, and very important vitamin D. What are Dr. Ela's sort of go-tos when it comes to weekly habits, lifestyle habits that really help support the parasympathetic nervous system?
So you're asking for me personally?
Yeah, personally. What do you do personally? I mean, animals are incredible for the parasympathetic nervous system. Hugging is so important, which we've lost over this corona coaster. It has huge impacts. But what is Dr. Ela and her patients and her clients? What do you do?
Yeah. So when it comes to movements, embodiment practices are really important. And I have a variety of embodiment practices, and I encourage my patients and myself to engage with all kinds of physical movement, to vary it, okay? Because this is going to increase the flexibility of our neurological system and our mind-body connection, and the neural pathways that sprout up when we engage with different movement modalities. So personally, I love yoga.
Good.
I love long walks in nature, and I do some functional training. Nothing too hectic, but just, you know, I like to keep my core strength. I like to work with my fascia. I like to work with some strength. I love to work with the beautiful flexibility and supporting the energy flow in my body. And just there's something that is just so beautiful and primal about long walks.
Absolutely.
And therapeutic, you know.
Walking.
So but I encourage people to use different movement practices based on what they're feeling. You know, there's sometimes in my life I just feel like I need to do some boxing, you know, like, you know, just get connected to that yang energy, you know, and sometimes I just want to do a deep restorative yoga class. So I think it's important to have a wide range of movement practices that we use, and dependent on how we feel. You know, I think something that we don't speak about enough is how different women are in the different phases of their menstrual cycle.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, we are biologically, biochemically, emotionally completely different in the 4 cycles of our menstrual cycle. And we need to adapt our movement practices according to what the body's needing, what the body's saying, what is going to be supportive of the body at that point.
That's right. And I've also realized, speaking to Patrick McKeown, how important it is to breathe through your nose if you want an aerobic workout, and that's what I love about walking. Hippocrates said, man's best medicine is walking. He said the greatest medicine of all, out of anything, is to teach people how not to need it. So you, the embodiment of that teaching. So that's the greatest medicine of all. But he said man's best medicine is walking. But just breathing through your nose, and for those that are not listening, this high intensity interval training or boxing has its place, but once again, that engages the sympathetic nervous system. And I find a lot of people are working hard, playing hard, exercising hard, pushing hard. And
Absolutely.
I think the yogas and the stretching and the Pilates with the correct breathing and keeping in that zone 2 area of aerobic is really important, because I think those other modalities, you have to be very careful, because they can drain you more. They can drain your adrenals even more. Isn't that right, Doc?
Absolutely. And it's interesting because the people who are kind of type A and really driven are drawn towards the modalities that feed the adrenalized energy. So we become addicted to our own adrenaline, right?
That's right.
And so once again, it's what am I really needing? And sometimes I feel like a little bit lethargic, and maybe I need a little bit more adrenaline. It's dependent on my personality, on our personalities rather. And so often we're drawn to the things that we want, not necessarily what we need.
Correct. That's right.
So I think once again, awareness and listening to what is really going to be supportive of the body-mind system. Yes, most of us need to be more moving towards the parasympathetic activity. But once again, what we really want to work on is the balance and the flexibility. And
absolutely. Tell us a little bit about health coaching. I've got a mandate and a mission at Made to Thrive. There are 7 of us online. We all health coaches, because I believe there's a huge gap in South Africa from a health coaching point of view. Someone walking a journey with you, someone being a sounding board, someone researching and facilitating your transformation, not doing the work, but guiding you as a guide.
Absolutely.
What do you think about health coaching, and where is it sort of situated in South Africa? Because I find people, say they've done a weekend course, and then they say they're a health coach, which does more damage. And we're partnering with a very big organization in America called the Kresser Institute. Chris Kresser, who's one of the top functional medicine docs there. But how important is health coaching, and where is it in South Africa?
I think health coaching has a fundamental role to play, and for exactly the reasons that you're saying now. Change is a process. Change is really difficult, and especially when we're under-resourced, as most people are when they come through, when they're experiencing any kind of emotional or physical illness or disharmony, is that they're under-resourced. They don't have the resources to make change. And so we need the support, we need the guidance, we need someone who we feel sometimes accountable to. I know personally, I work much better when I know I'm accountable to someone.
That's right.
So I think the role of the health coach is a role of partner, partner in health, and shifting the paradigm of this hierarchical doctor-patient relationship where I'm going to my doctor and he knows the answers and I'm just going to hand my power over. So I think that the health coach is a partner in health that shifts this dynamic to one that is far more empowering for the patient. I think it's also important to maintain standards, like even in the breathwork world at the moment. There's everybody can call themselves a breathwork practitioner. And as the field grows, as it is in health coaching, it is important to have some standards.
Correct. To help and sort of bring standardization and to ensure that people get the best sort of health coaching, well, not medical practice, but the best health coaching that they can, and for those people to be accountable as well, to the public.
Absolutely.
And I've always said doctors are not trained in behavioural change or sustained change.
That's
and
right.
We can't expect them to do that. We can't expect them to walk a journey because they're not trained in that, and they often don't have enough time, and they don't have those skills. So it's there to guide people, I think, the health coach, and to help people with the transformation when the doctor said something and you're only going to see the doctor every 3 months.
Very much so. So I think health coaches and doctors should really be working in partnership.
Absolutely. And the doctors that I've approached, because being part of the Society of Integrative Medical Practitioners, SASM, is people aren't keen to have health coaches in those consults yet. Cleveland Clinic, Dr. Mark Hyman, he does group visit, he's got a health coach there, you've got 8 people in there, he can see more people, and the research that they've done at the Cleveland Clinic has shown that those 8 individuals, over the amount of focus groups they've done, have actually had better outcomes than the individual that sits with the functional medicine doctor, which is fascinating.
And I feel for patients, because it's still so fragmented. Doctors not connected to health coaches, not connected to homeopaths and chiropractors. And I just feel if we can work more to support each other, we can change the face of healthcare.
Absolutely. Okay, last question, Dr. Ela Manga. You enter a lift and the health minister is right next to you. You've got 30 seconds to tell him about breathwork. What do you say?
I would definitely not tell him about breathwork. Let's use this 30 seconds to breathe and get him to actually experience it.
Okay, fantastic.
Because that's where the shift will happen.
Fantastic. Now, where can people find you? The workshops, the book is incredible. I've read it. My wife has read it. It started me along the journey of breathing, and it was the seed. I forgot about it. I'm now breathing differently when I run after 11 comrades and 35,000 kilometers. I'm breathing totally differently when I exercise, when I work, when I'm doing work at the computer. It's so important and fundamental. Where can people find you? Where can they engage with you? Where can they do workshops with you?
Yeah. So my website, drelamanga.com, and breathworkafrica.co.za, and you can find all our courses and our workshops. We've got an incredible 3-day workshop coming up, so yeah, all the information is on those 2 websites.
Fantastic. I know you've had some media, where can people look from a media? I know you're on 702, I think you did a masterclass from what I can remember. Are there all those sort of YouTube or media clips that people can put your name in and find out a little bit more?
I have a YouTube channel, so you can find a lot of my clips there. And we have a lot of those resources and podcast recordings, those links on my website.
Fantastic. We'll put everything in the show notes. I salute you, I honor you, I respect you, and I thank you for your time and coming out here. You're a pioneer, and I think, I just believe that if I look at my children and I look at the next generation, all the stress, the oxidative stress that they have to go through, from radiation and 5G to indoor living to toxicity in our foods, and they're at a different level of oxidative stress than we were at. And if we can use breathwork that can be just taught, and they don't need money or supplements, they need awareness and education, like you said, I think it's going to change a generation to such a large degree. So thank you so much. And I know that we're going to cross paths again, and I really appreciate you.
Thank you so much, and thank you for all the work you're doing too.